So we start in 3 minutes. I was tasked to read you something like sanity and rules we have to follow. First one, we have to end of time. So this is a long session. I'm shortening some portion, but I'll try to answer some of the questions. If I don't know the answer, I'm going to find the space so we can cover something that's deeper or more technical with engineering, because we also have engineering here in Summit. And if there are some questions that I can answer completely, we can go outside after the session ends. So we can follow up the conversation. I don't have something right after this session, but we have to clean out the room for the next presentation. The second one is we are tasked also to clean the room after the session is over for the next session, so it's going to be clean and nice as it is right now. And finally, take all the empty drinks and trash with you, please, for the next session, so we have everything ready, kind of following airplane rules here. So that's it. So we have 2 minutes to start. I asked already this question, so for everyone that's joining, who is network engineer or who is doing some sort of network automation right now? Okay, like advanced network automation, like testing and moving to production. I heard your use case about ACI. Jim is there in the back. Like he's raising the hand. He's the Nexus product manager in Cisco. We are going to be presenting in the afternoon. And any question about the Nexus integration, we also have him and engineering, so we can cover these specific use cases. And it will be also good to have your feedback on how was the experience, so we can keep going and making things better on the progress. It's always good to know that. So I think we are on time. 1 minute. So, okay, I'm going to take this out. Not used to things. Okay. So I introduce myself 1 minute before we start. My name is Daphne Mendoza. This session was expected to have also Sean Cavanaugh. He's going to be covering some Lightspeed labs right now, so I'm going solo, so bear with me. I'm a technical marketing manager. Basically, the role is create technical content to showcase technical capabilities of Ansible automation platform. And I'm covering 2 segments right now, which are network and edge automation. So network automation is what we are going to cover. This is an introductory session, but it's covering also something that might be useful for you in production, like getting certified collections and validated content, what's the offer we have right now, and what's available to use. So I'm going to cover some fundamental basics, like what's the playbook, or how you use the resource modules, and so on. So just be aware that it's going to be a getting started session. And we are going to also cover some resources you can use in production. So just so you know, my former experience I was almost 10 years in Cisco systems. I joined Cisco when automation was not the big thing for Cisco, so I was doing network management. That's my background. I did network management for 10 years, like all the Cisco Prime family, and I worked mostly with telcos. So it was mostly MPLS configuration, like carrier management, some small cells, some optical, some cable provisioning. It was always provisioning. So at some point we had this inflection point when the team that was skilled, that was doing network management, started deploying controllers. So we leave the controller era, like DNAC for campus, some ACI for data center, and the NSO for MPLS, and at some point cross-board network controllers as the orchestration layer for the carrier networks and optical networks. So by 2017, more or less, we had all the Python wave. Like everyone was learning Python. That was the thing. That was network automation. and it was a big deal. We started doing a lot of scripts. And then we realized, even with our customers, that they were very hard to manage. And at some point, it's very hard to share what you build. So you are network engineer 1, and you are building your script to take configuration backups. And the network engineer 2 is creating something with shell scripts that does something slightly different. And the network engineer 3 is doing something different. So at some point, you have all this problem with source of truth. So like 2 years ago, we started working at Cisco, also with some Ansible inside our own projects. We used it for ourselves, for provisioning applications, deploying infrastructure, and some network automation. And we even had very nice integrations with NSO and Ansible, having this better together story with some of the customers. So that's how I joined the Ansible solution, and that's how I joined Red Hat like almost 2 years ago as technical marketing. Having this connection on what's in production, what we are supporting for the business, and mapping that into technical use cases. Because at the end of the day, the network is intentionally connecting something that's going to bring revenue for our companies, right? So it's not that we are configuring a VLAN, it's not that we are configuring an interface, it's that we are providing connectivity for some specific resource that's at the end. So we are either connecting applications, or we are either connecting point of sales or different endpoints or different services that are relevant for our own companies. So here we have some resources, you probably saw them before, on how you can get started into a network automation. And something we built in the technical marketing team was a list of very basic and fundamental use cases that can be applied in production and that can do an impact in the network automation. So what we'll cover, I summarize without the technicals, but it's Ansible fundamentals, basic configuration management, that's mostly day one, VLANs, access list, interfaces, the user, the management user, AAA, like all these basic day one configuration can be automated with Ansible. And we did that in production. Like one customer told me, like, I want to paint my routers with the colors of the company. That's basically what we do with day one configuration with Ansible. Ansible utils and CLI parse, I'm going to cover slightly. It's mostly for data manipulation. Because at some point, we are not only pushing configuration, but we are getting the configuration, and we have to be able to parse what we want so we can act upon that information. So the network is a resource, right? So we are getting the data, and we are going to do something later. And after that, we have reading the network and the operational state, dynamic documentation for dynamic networks, using the workflows, and that is mostly the network operations focused, right? So we have also at the end the validated content. I'm going to show you what's the validated content that we have available. Have you heard about validated content? Are you using it? Not yet? Okay, not yet. So, okay, we are going to check. Validated content is basically libraries of pre-canned code, opinionated code that was developed by the same network engineers that are developing the collections. They are building samples. So you have access to the sample codes. So you can just create simple playbooks and call that code and use it right away. So you don't have to build the code from the scratch. So that's the objective of validated content. So this is just a reference. I like to show references. It's something similar to what you did. Like when you are moving traffic between data centers, the main problem I see is that usually you have to call that one engineer, right? Like the super engineer that knows the stuff. And that's a really big problem when you want to scale the operations. So the time to resolution is hard, not because the issues are hard or not because something is really damaged or broken in the network, but mostly because the people is out having lunch or on PTO or in the night. So the time to solve issues, you have a lot of delays in the middle, and it's mostly because until the NOC realizes that you have a failure and they open a ticket and they call and escalate internally and someone is running the show tech and show run commands, you had hours in the middle. So something we're trying to remediate is you can use automation, and now we have event-driven Ansible also, mostly to enrich tickets. So if something is happening, you open a ticket and automatically run the show commands and put that information into the ticket, so it's faster. So when it escalates, you can just have all the information automatically parsed. And in this case, what they did is they had the downtime issue, which is big for us, and they wanted to solve in minutes, not hours. So they are saving around 2 hours per service move just using Ansible automation. They are not using EDA. So as Ansible fundamentals, if you know it, you might get a little bored, but basically how we build the network automation content is using the structure of having the inventory here, using some specific plugins, you start the play and you have the tasks, right? And here with the modules, you define what you want to do, so each one of these tasks. Now, if you've seen the keynote demo, they mentioned Lightspeed. What will Lightspeed do is you will define here in the language your task, and it will build this portion. So it will build the tasks. That's what Lightspeed will do. And it's a plugin that you connect into the install for VS Code, and it simplifies the creation of these tasks and the playbooks. It's mostly for people that's getting started, because if you are trained into network CLI, it's very hard to convert all that knowledge into playbooks, at least at the beginning. So we also have roles. Roles are defined to be reusable automation actions. So in the validated content, we use roles. So the network engineering develops roles, so you can create your playbook calling those roles, and you can reuse them. The objective is that you don't have to build everything from the scratch every time you want to do something. So that's why you have roles. And it's a reusable structure. So you write them once, and you can share them. And we have the collections. So what we did with collections is basically provide a structured format for the automation content. Why is that? Because as it is open source and we have contributors everywhere, at some point we needed to have something that provides consistency between all the automation content. So we have modules, playbooks, roles that we have checked, plugins, documentation, and tests, all following the same directory structure, and the structure is like this. So you see here, you have plugins, the roles, and here what each one of these tasks will do. So with that, this is the portfolio of collections that are available for Red Hat Ansible Automation Platform. This is not Galaxy, so just you know. These are like certified, which means that if something breaks, you can open a case to Red Hat or the certified partner. I marked here which are the network automation collections. One that's recent is Palo Alto. And here we have Cisco as a partner, but that doesn't mean that we have one collection for Cisco. So just to zoom in one of the partnerships, this is what we have with Cisco. So we are going to have the session with Nexus, with Jim. But this is what we have for data center. And for observability, these are coming, like plugins for Thousand Eyes and App Dynamics. These are in the roadmap. So we are going to have also plugins for observability. This is for event-driven Ansible. And we have the certified collections that are updated. And we also have the iOS XR and iOS and as a firewall and a DNA center and identity services engine integration. What does this mean? With network automation, we tend to forget that we have domains. So you have one person that's highly skilled that knows ACI, and a different person that's highly skilled that knows the campus network. And it's very hard to be fully expert in different domains, because even the certification paths are different, right? So at some point, you know SD1, you are an expert in SD1, but you are not the expert in ACI. And you are not the expert in Campus, or, well, Campus is like everyone is an expert in Campus, in iOS. So at some point, it gets so complex because of these network domains. And now we have the cloud. So you have to be able to connect to the cloud, manage the data center, plus, well, this is telco domain, plus your enterprise remote sites, which is SD1 or traditional one, plus Wi-Fi, and plus the enterprise campus. So what Ansible allows you is to have some sort of a skills consolidation. So the objective is that the day-to-day operational tasks are automated. So your highly skilled people is perfecting or doing some sort of optimization, and also doing something that's more specific use cases. But the day-to-day configurations, which is VLANs, access lists, usernames, SNMP, all these basic configuration can be automated. So where do you find the certified collections? You have two options. So one is the private automation hub. When you install it, you can get access, and I'm going to show you. And this is my private automation hub. So here you have the Red Hat certified, plus community, plus validated. So these are supported. That means that either Red Hat or a partner develops and supports the collections, and these are the validated. So this is pre-canned content. So if you want to configure BGP or VPNs or firewalls, we have also the base configuration. This is RHEL Linux builder for images. So this is pre-canned. And we have OSPF and interfaces that should be coming or are here already. So what we have with validated content is the sample. So you have the capabilities here, and it's pre-done for you, you see? So here you just build the playbook, but you are calling these predefined roles to automate. And the other option is console.redhat.com, which is in the cloud. So you can download the images. What's the difference with Galaxy? Are you using Galaxy or Galaxy? Okay. The difference is Red Hat contributes both. So you can store your repos into, well, Private Automation Hub and the console.redhat.com, which is Automation Hub, which is in a cloud. It's basically providing a secure way for you to store and consume the collections. Because what happens with Galaxy is that anyone can contribute. And even though Red Hat engineers also contribute and test some of the collections, they will not be testing nightly, or they will not be like running deep audits, because that content is public. So basically, that's the difference. So that's why we always push, like if you are going to move to production, use the private automation hub or the automation hub, because these are certified, and at some point, all the collections are going to be signed as well. So I think in the version 2.4, they have a key, and they are signed to avoid tampering. So we are working heavily on having the secure supply chain, including signing the execution environments, the certified collections, and the playbooks as well, the projects. Now, what's the difference with network automation is that most of the routers, if not all of them, you cannot install agents. So when you are automating Linux hosts, the code is copied and executed locally. But when we are automating the routers, the code is run from the automation controller. Now that changes slightly with automation mesh. Have you checked automation mesh? No? Great. So basically what we did is we decoupled control layer and the execution layer. So you can have execution nodes closer to your endpoints. That means that you can have like one execution node per data center. So you don't have the traffic coming back and forth. Mostly when you have big networks at scale, like 1,000 devices. And also, it allows to have this like modularity in the execution. You can have some different type of execution environments per zone. So how we connect to the networks, I added this. So for networks, we have multi-vendor. That's frequent. I haven't seen a customer that only has one type of OS. And we also have SDN controllers. So how we connect, we can use network CLI, which is for SSH, netconf, or the HTTP API, which applies for the SDN controllers. So the objective at the long term is that you have the integrations with the standalone and control devices with SDN. Now, this is my testing environment. I have 2 Aristas and 1 Cisco IOS device. So it's not going to be only me speaking here. And we're going to start with the basic configuration management using resource modules. Okay? So have you used the network automation resource modules, or are you using mostly command line? It's both. Yeah, it's kind of a combination, because the resource modules don't have everything, but they provide some abstraction capabilities. So you are going to have access to the slides. I don't want to read all of them. But basically, the network automation modules allow you to run these different actions. You can run commands. You can get information, which is called gathering facts. You can run some specific configuration. And you can also manage resources. For us, the resources are specific portions of the configuration. So that could be access list, could be one resource. VLANs is one resource. Interfaces is one resource. Like the way Ansible sees the network is like each router will have different resources that you can automate. So there is a lot of this modularity concept. And we are going to see some of the examples with the resources. So for example, here one resource is the interface, right? Interfaces is one resource. And getting facts, what it does is basically Ansible is working as a converter. It's converting. So the issue that we have with network is that the network doesn't have a structured format, or traditionally it doesn't. So if you run a show run command or show version command, the output is really hard to parse, right? You have to use regex. And at some point when you use regex, and you have different iOS versions, the parsing rules break because they have slight differences. So what's Ansible doing? It's running the command for you and putting it into a JSON format. So at some point, you will have structured data. It's easier to parse later because you are parsing just one specific variable here. So if I want to see the version, it's Ansible net version, and I have the OS. So I don't have to run the show version and parse line by line. I don't have to use regex. And something that the resource module do is they can configure resources, right? And you use structured data to configure them. So I'm going to show you an example that configures SNMP, and is using the structured format. So that's the simplicity of having YAML as a language to manage the network, is that you can use this structure for a multi-vendor networking, just changing the modules you want to use. And Ansible will convert it into the network configuration format, to the CLI format. For the resource modules, which are like interfaces, VLANs, protocols, OSPF, BGP, and so on, you can run all these actions, or you can define all these specific settings. So you can define, for example, if you are configuring, if you want to merge it, if you want to override the configuration, if you want to delete that configuration, or if you want to replace it. So it will control the behavior of how you are configuring. And you can also define if you are going to gather the information, we are going to save it, you can parse it, and you can render it into the device native format. And for return, you can define if you want to return like before, after, or if you want to run some comments. Then we have the plugins, and I'm going to start running the demo so we can see this in live. Or do you want to run the demo now? Someone jet lagged? No? Okay, I have the same time zone, so I'm good. Okay, I'm going to run the demo so you don't get bored, okay? So, okay, so this is SNMP resource, okay? So for Ansible and for me now, this was very hard for me. I know you're more advanced, but at some point, like stop seeing the network as something that's untouchable, right? Like everything is a resource in the network. So SNMP, if I want to configure the SNMP, I have to see it as a resource that I'm providing. So for the SNMP, I have this playbook. What it's doing is configuring SNMP. This is the most simple use case. I'm importing the variables here. I'm going to show you the vars. And I'm defining, if it is iOS, like use this collection. And you see it's the same format, Cisco iOS dot iOS SNMP server. I'm not, oh, crap. Man, you have to tell me. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to bring this, okay. Will be easier. Okay, now? Yeah. You see, I was highlighting. Okay. So I'm configuring the SNMP. I'm importing here the configuration. And here is just a matter of choosing. So this is multi-vendor, and the format is not changing that much. So for me, it's just defining which is the collection I want to use, Cisco iOS or NXOS or Arista or XR, and the resource is almost the same, EOS SNMP server. I'm defining that it's going to merge the configuration. So if there is some SNMP configuration there, I'm not going to override or delete or do nothing. I'm merging. And I have the rules. So when I have EOS, use this. When you have iOS, use that. And the SNMP config is here, and you're going to see key vars. Key value, right? Key value. So for me now, the network is just a pool of resources, and I define key values. So if I run this playbook, oh, where I am. Okay. So I'm going to close this. So if I run this playbook, where's my automation hub? So I'm going to configure the SNMP. So for the iOS, it's skipping the Arista routers. I don't have Nexus here. And I have some Arista routers. So it changed my 3 routers in a different fashion. And I can see what it changed in a JSON format. So everything starts being structured. Even the configuration you are sending, even the outputs you are getting. So if you want to document the change, you can just easily parse a JSON. So that's the biggest difference between using Ansible or the CLI and using the resource modules. So I'm going to cover this quickly so you have it as reference. And this session is going to be available online, and it goes deeper. It's 1 hour long, I think even more. So if you want to have this like on demand and watch specific demos for everything, you are going to have this available. So utilities and plugins are basically extensions to allow you to do some more advanced manipulation. Are you using them, plugins? Nice. What are you doing? Yeah?
Yes, we're using a lot of lookup plugins.
Lookup plugins.
Like to basically our inventory gets the basis for our.
Yeah, and you're doing some sort of validation, right? Like if it is IP address format, yeah. They allowed some sort of extension. So at some point when you are defining configuration, you want to see, for example, if the IP address is in a proper format. So you have all this tooling available. And I'm adding here the resources. And I'm just extending on the CLI parse, because something you want to do when you are getting configuration using CLI is do some parsing. So you can have some reporting capabilities later. And that's critical, because something that happens a lot is that you don't really have visibility on everything that's in the network. It's really hard. So it's really hard to even know what you have in place. So being able to just start getting information, parsing it nicely, and having some sort of reporting, that's a very fundamental use case. And I have the example, right? You can run a show version and convert it into some specific format. Something that's useful as well, and I'm going to go later into a demo also, is that you don't only want to configure, but you want to also check sanity in the network. So you want to see if, after you configure the OSPF neighbor, the protocols are up. And if you are sharing the routes, so you want to check state. After you configure the interfaces, something that happened to me, I broke a network because I configured wrongly a bundle. So it was my first job. I was tasked to configure a bundle. So I didn't follow the right steps, right? So I configured 2 interfaces in one side. I think it was 4-port bundle. So 4 interfaces here, 4 interfaces here, from a switch to the core switch, Catalyst 6500. And I configured the port channels. So I had port channel 1, port channel 1. And I brought the interfaces up and not the port channel. So the interfaces didn't start at the same time. So I created a loop. And that loop broke the network in 2 minutes because I had a broadcast storm. So this type of basic operational tasks can be easily automated. So you avoid having the people, the newbie as I was, breaking the network because they are turning up a port channel in the wrong way. And something you want to also be able to do is that when you are configuring, you see that after the configuration, you didn't break something. Because I didn't realize, like, oh, I turned the ports up, so everything is good. Let's go have lunch. And then they said, but the cashiers are not able to run the payments. Like, what did you do? So it was myself that didn't check the operational state later and created a broadcast storm. So what's the difference between config? You don't only want to config, but you also want to check that you didn't break things, that the operational state is as you want to. So that's something you can automate. Now, something that's easier, that's the lowest risk. So biggest challenge when you are starting automating is that you can also automate errors, right? So that's the main concern. So something that's easy to start, you can just do it right now, is gathering facts. Get the information, get what you have in the network. And you can use the facts module. So we have different modules, and they behave the same. So instead of having the show version and parsing, you can just say, like, get me the iOS facts, and you will have this format. So it's getting the configuration, converting nicely for you, and you have a JSON. And you can even debug, so you can see in real life how it's working, and run with verbosity. That's what I have here. So please tell me if I'm not sharing. I don't want to embarrass myself twice. OK. So let's see if I have facts here. Basics, yeah. So I have some facts. OK, so for Arista hosts, I can run some specific facts. And I want to gather the configuration, and I want to gather everything, but I want to print only the interfaces. So you see, I'm starting to manage everything as code. So this is Arista. So only for the Arista routers, it's going to retrieve the facts and print me immediately the interfaces in a JSON format. So that's basically what facts do. And you can gather whatever you want. So you see, for me, these are resources. So I can see the interfaces. And I can do the same with just changing the resource module. Wait. I zoom out too much. I zoom in too much. So for Cisco, you see it's just a matter of changing the Cisco. And here I'm debugging, so I'm going to show real time what's happening. So it's that simple. Where's Cisco? Facts, OK. OK. So you see I'm printing here the version, serial number, iOS version, and I can see what are the facts that it can gather. Are you thinking about use cases that you can apply right now? Yes, right. Like if you have been tasked to do some sort of inventory management to see if the versions are right and some compliance, like the starting point in running facts. OK, so where I am, here. And how you work, you see, is the same format. You have two ways. One is to gather a specific resource, like I want to gather the facts only for VLANs, only for interfaces, or you can get everything, as I just did, and parse later. It depends on how much verbosity you need and what you want to do later. And the display result will always be this structured format or a JSON format. So what's the objective is that at some point, when you have different vendors, you use the same format, like EOS facts, iOS facts, or Juniper facts, and the subset is the same, right? So at some point, you don't have to know all the CLIs and parse differently, because that will be done with the resource module. Now, how I can use it? Dynamic documentation, that's the first use case. You can get dynamic reports. It's read-only. It uses facts. It doesn't break the network. You're just running show commands. And it's very valuable, because you will always get tasks on inventory management, what are the serial numbers, audit capabilities, how many interfaces you have them, if the username is configured everywhere. Like, do you have the management user everywhere? Basic configuration rules, you can use the facts information and do something for that. So I have here, OK. Have you seen this demo, the dynamic inventory, before? No? OK, we have a self-paced lab, and you can clone the code. So what it does, dynamic reports. So that playbook, while it's running, I'm going to show you what it does. Just a second. Dynamic reports, this came from the workshop project. OK, I'm going to copy this. So I think it's here. Network report. So what it does, it builds a report, and I'm calling the role build report. So it's getting facts, and it is installing a web server. And the web server will, I don't have the roles here, sorry. And the web server is going to, so it's going to install a web server, it's going to gather the facts, and it's going to format the facts into an HTML report. And that's a very simple demo. So I'm going to share the code at the end. Sorry, I don't want to take longer. But this is the output. So you see, it's gathering facts for Arista, for Cisco, displaying the facts. You can skip this. And it's building the report. So it even installs Apache. It changes to the specific port. So you have everything that's needed. And at the end, you can just connect to this web page, and you will see the report. So this is an example report. It's very basic. So it is demo-oriented, but you still can see I have OSPF configuration, BGP, the VLANs, they are not configured. Interfaces. So I have all the layer 1, layer 2, and layer 3 information here. So this is for sample routers, but you can do that in production and having something more advanced, just gathering facts. This is read-only. I'm not touching anything. I'm just reading. And finally, something that I love is workflows. Are you using workflows? Nice. Because we come back to the CCIE that's having lunch, right? So something that you really want to do is automate your operations, not only your configuration. So you, in order to take the most out of the Ansible, you have to automate operations. So here we're talking about day 2 operations. And now with EDA, I think we have a lot of possibilities to enrich the operations automation. Because you want to act upon and you want to react faster. And even without EDA. So when you have a maintenance window, where you waste the time? Where do you waste time in a maintenance window? Troubleshooting, pre-checks, post-checks, calling the NOC. So I've been like 11 p.m. running show commands in routers and taking the output, putting into a Word document, sending to the NOC and waiting. Waiting for 1-2 hours until they give you the okay. With my customers. No, while I was in Cisco, with my customers, telco customers, you start at 11:30. The maintenance window should start at midnight. But sometimes you start at 1 a.m. because you are waiting, and you are calling the NOC, you are sending the email, and they have multiple maintenance windows, so at some point you are just waiting. They could run a playbook and run the pre-checks and notify you. You can have ChatOps use cases. So at some point you run, okay, you have the okay, you run the configuration, you have everything deployed, you validate again, and then you wait again. You wait for 2 hours, and it's 5 a.m. And you're all burned out, sleepy, waiting, because the post-checks are also run manually. Because someone is entering router by router, 50 routers, 100 routers, getting show commands, validating the state. So at some point I've seen, it's true, I've seen whole teams post-COVID quitting telco because they are burnt out. And I've also struggled, I ask for maintenance windows for migration use cases. Like, we want to have this migration. When can I have the maintenance window? In 1 month. Like, why? Because we have too many maintenance windows in queue, and people is working from Monday to Sunday at that rhythm. So honestly, it's humanly impossible to keep that pace. So at some point, you just are sleepy, you are copy-pasting commands, and you are making mistakes because you are tired, and copy-pasting mobs that are done in Word or that are done in spreadsheets. So what automation is doing is not only for network operations, it's also working as a disruptor. So something I saw after presenting an automation project to a CTO in a telco customer was having the managers having that conversation. Like, okay, so now we can send 200 lines of configuration in 5 minutes. How long does the maintenance window take? How long does getting the maintenance window approved take? How are we going to work with operations now? So engineering defined the configuration task, operations executed, and the NOC validated. So how are we going to work the 3 teams better so the automation is not only for configuration, but also for operations? So that's a fundamental change on how we are working. And we had that conversation with the customer this morning. The hardest part is change the process, how the culture, how the people behaves. But automation can work as a disruptor. So the idea is to solve a whole automation IT process. So you are integrating, you are opening the ticket. We have ServiceNow integrations, for example. So you are opening the ticket, running the commands, updating the ticket, deploying the change, running all the pre and post checks in advance, and even the rollback. So this is a workflow I have. It is a demo-oriented, it's not production. But this is how it should look, or even more complex, right? So you get the report, you get the backup, you configure the changes. I'm adding a banner, there's an MP and a network user. And at the end, you can get a report, or if something breaks, you can restore the previous configuration. So you have the automated rollback. This is how automation in production should look. So let's check this one. And what I like from it is that it's modular. So I have here maintenance window use case. So I'm launching this template, and it's running all these tasks. So it will complete one by one, right? And at the end, it will either configure or roll back. But also at the end, I can get a report on I can have the report of the initial state and of the end state. So there is a lot of possibilities here on what you can do, right? You can run the pre-checks, you can open the ticket, update the ticket with the pre-checks. Then at the end, check the operational state. If everything is nice, close the ticket with the post-check, just to give one example. And if something breaks, it's not mandatory that you will automatically restore. So sometimes you don't want to restore automatically. Sometimes you want to troubleshoot. But you can also have chat ops integrations. So if something breaks, immediately someone gets notified and you can escalate it, like to level 2 support. So that's something that you can also automate. So this is still running. At some point it will finish. Are we good? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. I don't want to bore you. No. Okay. Waiting is the hardest part. I hate waiting. Yeah, all the waiting, come on. Yeah.
What do you see the impact of Ansible Lightspeed and the generative Ansible code in this process of real-time triage?
Yeah. Lightspeed is helping you in a different place. Lightspeed is not for this part, but for this part. So here, for this. So it's a plugin. So you get a plugin, you install it into VS Code, and what Lightspeed will do is you will write the name here, like check the credentials. Check the credentials are set, and it will create the task for you. So it doesn't create the whole playbook, but it creates the task. So you have to go task by task, defining what you want to do. So something that Lightspeed has is context also. Because if you are using like Cisco resource modules, it will have the training or the context to understand that this is a network automation playbook for Cisco. So if you are also defining a task for like installing a web server, it will provide a different output, right? So it's getting heavily trained on the specific use cases, but that's what it will do. Now, how it helps, the challenge I've seen in all the customers is that you have highly skilled teams that are like super users, and you have teams that are just getting started. So it's very rare that you have like network plus Linux plus VMware plus cloud automation at the same time, and applications. So you usually have something that's fully on board, that people is trained and they are automating everything, but other teams no. So what it is doing, like Lightspeed, is helping you onboard like all these new teams. And that's the objective. I think there is a lab, if you want to join, for Lightspeed that was happening when you have the plugin and you can see it. So this is how the maintenance window should look. I have some routers here if you want to check. I'm not lying. I can run the show running so you can see it. But that's basically how it works. And before we finish, because I think we're on time. So we have the workflows. What's new? The Ansible validated content. So what's the difference? Certified content, you have this, like what I want to automate, which collections I use. I want to integrate with VMware, use the VMware REST API collection, and so on. The second is validated content, which is how I should automate. And this is our answer to one common concern we had from our customers. Like, I install Ansible Automation Platform. Now, how do I get started? Where are my examples? So this is a library of opinionated code that has these examples. So that's what I show you, like BGP, OSPF, interfaces, VLANs, and we are building that library. So at some point, we want to add telemetry, for example, as a use case. We want to have like a proper and nice library that has all these use cases, and use cases that were implemented in production, like building blocks for the automation. So these are some of the collections, right? This is in the Private Automation Hub validated. That's what you will have. And finally, event-driven Ansible. If you can join these sessions, they are good. And event-driven Ansible applies not only for network automation, but it will have integrations with different plugins, and different sources of information. So for networking, I know that in the roadmap, we'll have Thousand Eyes and AppDynamics, which is FFSO, I think now the name. So we'll have that integration as well. So the idea here is to keep moving into the operations so the operations can get simplified. And people is not wasting the time configuring and running commands, but on more like enhancements or having migrations faster, like having more compliance use cases, having more like interesting also use cases. So you are not just running conft interface, name, no shutdown, and that's your job, right? At some point, you want to do something that's more challenging and more interesting in the long time. So we are on time. Thank you. Sorry.